At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
It is a new day for 911 professionals. They have gone from the most important person you will never see to the most vital piece of public safety. Truth be told, they always have been. The curtain has been pulled back, and they are sharing their stories. Welcome to Imagine Listening. Your Worst Day is Our Everyday by Ricardo Martinez II, and narrated by myself, Ricardo Martinez II, and distributed by Beacon Audio Books. Copyright 2023. That's right, everyone. Finally, I can let everyone know the rumors are true. Imagine Listening, Your Worst Day is Our Everyday is now available as an audiobook on Audible, and it's a long time coming. Very excited. Not a lot of authors get the opportunity to voice their own book, but I had the honor and privilege to do so. So thank you to Beacon Audio Books, as well as my publisher, Titled Town Publishing, for everything, but especially all of you for making the I Am 911 movement, as well as Imagine Listening, what it is today. I appreciate you all more than you know. So go ahead, head out, stream it, download it, however you consume your audiobooks. Imagine Listening is now available. If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast, whether you are on Circle, Patreon, or Facebook. Thank you for everything, but especially all of you who are here watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. I wouldn't be able to do this if it wasn't for all of you, so thank you so very much. There is a lot going on, as usual, and by the time this episode airs, I may have already been at the Navigator Conference, where I was in booth 215, and I also had an Imagine Listening session out there. I say that because there are a ton of episodes of just amazing, powerful stories, powerful content that's coming out. And I'm just excited for all of you to listen to all of it and watch as well, because this is done on video and audio. So again, a lot of things coming up, a lot of speaking opportunities, and I'll be training in multiple states for my 8-hour communications course that I do with 911 professionals. So make sure to look out for all of that. And we're going to go ahead and jump right in. I'm excited for my guest today, and my guest is Leah Harms, and she is a 911 professional, an industry partner, as well as author of Lives on the Line. Hello.
Hey, Ricardo, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Things are good, except right now. And of course, like I said a little bit ago, by the time this comes out, this will already have passed. But right now, I've got friends in the state of Ohio that are on high alert. And I think there are some in West Virginia as well. There's some crazy, like, tornado weather that's going on over towards that area. So shout out to all of you. I hope you are all okay, that everything is all right.
Yeah, I've heard the nation is just wrapped with crazy weather lately. And I'm like, it's not even tornado season yet either, and yet huge hail is falling out of the skies. And,
Right.
yeah,
It's crazy because about a month ago, I was at a meeting, and I just want to say this really quick as we're talking about like craziness that's going on in the world.
oh,
I was out at a meeting with a bunch of directors. It was Indiana's Nina and APCO chapters that I was out there with, and I was visiting friends, but I was there for some of the talks that they were giving as well. And one of them was from emergency management, and they were talking about the eclipse and how there are so many places that are getting prepared for all kinds of craziness that is possibly going to happen. And by the time this comes out, the eclipse will have already passed. Hopefully, everything is okay. But there's a lot of states that are really, really preparing for. I don't know. It's just for the eclipse.
for traffic, for
Hmm.
overrun supermarkets. Me
Right.
myself, where I live in Texas, I am right in the eclipse range. So you better believe that Mama over here is doing some grocery shopping this week, making sure that we do not have to go out, into the crazy traffic. But yeah, there are a lot of counties that have already declared state of emergency because they just can't handle the influx of folks. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And my mom and my younger sisters were saying, "Why are you trying to freak us out?" I said, "You're not in that area." I told them the same thing. I said, this is the reason they're preparing is because there's going to be so many people, tourist style, that are going to be going there. That in some of these smaller cities, they're telling people, "Get ready, make sure you have your food." It's not
Right,
because, like, some crazy disaster, it's just because there's gonna be so many people, you might not have, and, supplies,
right.
so you gotta be prepared all the time.
Get your bread, get your milk, get your eggs, baby. I'm just saying.
Right. Yes, exactly. Make sure you have the essentials. So, with that, all of that stuff that's going on, I want to jump into your story here. So, you've got about 11 years in public safety, 8 in dispatch, and then the rest on the private side of 911 with everything that you're doing. And how did you get involved in public safety to begin with? Now, do you come from a family of public safety, or are you like a lot of us that kind of stumbled into it and found out that it was your calling?
I'm a stumbler for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I could definitely relate with everybody that comes on and says that was their story.
Mhm.
Um, Couple things I knew about myself. When I was going through school, I was a UNC Bear, did my undergrad there, double majored in communication and journalism, and then didn't know what I wanted to do. Got a husband, at the time, and he needed a victory lap. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do in Greeley for another year? Okay, I'll go get my master's. So I got my master's, and then I was like, okay, now what? I don't know what I want to do with my life. And at the time, my brother-in-law was working at the jail,
Mhm.
and he said, "They are always hiring for dispatchers. Like that post never comes down. What do you think about that?" And I was like, "Man, that sounds really cool." At the time, I knew I didn't want to do the same thing every day, and I wanted to do something everybody says this, but I wanted to do something to help people. So I was like, this seems like a cool thing. So applied, didn't even get a chance, like, to come in and interview or do the critical test or anything. It's like, okay, door closed, like, right in my face. So then I did a stint in sales for a little bit, had a lot of fun doing that, but it always lived in the back of my brain. So I constantly applied just to areas, different areas, different agencies, and finally got in. And I was like, cool, this is my chance. And, when it's in your blood, it's in your blood. I think you know that, Ricardo. And it's in my blood. So even if I'm not sitting behind the hot seat, with my headset on, answering those calls every day, living, breathing the peace out, it's still within me. I believe 911. So
I just listening to you, I kind of feel like we're the same in the sense that what if and potential for regret will eat at you. And I'm the same way. I would have been the same exact way if I hadn't tried again or more. If it was something, that I really felt inside me that I wanted to try to do, um, it would have eaten me up. And I would be thinking about it, years later. And I'm the type of person who I don't want to be that elderly person years from now staring up into the sky thinking, "Man, what if? What if I would have done that?" And, like, now there's not a lot of time, you know? I wanna be that elderly person years from now looking up at the sky smiling thinking, "I did that shit. Like, I
Yep.
did it, and I'm better for it." There's so many things. So, like you stuck with it. I'm glad you did because you ended up doing it for 8 years. So, you end up getting in there. Now, did you get a chance to do a sit along during that last time as you were getting hired in?
Absolutely. So when I got hired, I did a sit along, and that was a magical experience. And to this day, I'm still best friends with the girl I did a sit along with. Um, it was so magical seeing everything happen. I wish how people say, like, oh, I wish I could go back and read that book again from the
Mhm.
first time. Like, I almost wish I could go back and do that sit along again for the first time with all that I know now, or just to experience the magic of dispatch as it is, because it is such a fabulous and a wonderful um, orchestra of everything that's going on. The phone, the CAD, the mapping, the radio, the multifunctional dexterity. Watching it is truly watching a work of art. And I think everybody in our hot seat can really relate to that in a way, and also go, no way. But at the end of the day, it's really important to know that 2 to 4% of Americans can only do this job. 2 to 4%. So I hope that gave everybody goosebumps too, because
Yeah.
if you're listening to this, or you're in that hot seat, or you're not in that hot seat, I hope you have a damn good appreciation for the people that do it every day, because it's a hard job, and 2 to 4% of people can only do it. So
Man, I feel honored and blessed to be part of this thin gold line because right in there in that 2 to 4%. And I love the way you describe it as well, because immediately when you start talking about it, I think about when I first walked into the first police department, walking into that central dispatch, the way you describe it, the only way that I can put it out there in my head, all I could think was the original Willy Wonka. And when you're walking into when he opens up that door, excuse me, into the factory and you can hear the music playing, "Come with me and you'll see," and you'll be in a world of, pure
of
imagination.
imagination. Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You put that headset on and you start floating to the ceiling, I mean, just kidding, kids, that's not how it
Yeah,
works,
I know,
but
right, yeah, no, there's a lot more to it, but but it can
yeah,
feel that way, you just like you were saying, just kind of in awe of everything that's there. You've got all of these different monitors, you're listening to so many different things, so
mhm.
you thinking about when you walked in there, was it overwhelming at all? Like, was there anything that you saw that was maybe a
Oh,
surprise to you, or
oh,
was it
I
pretty much how
was
you expected?
I was scared shitless, Ricardo, like, I'm not kidding. I looked at the magnitude of everything that was happening, and I said, "Holy crap, there is no way I can do this." You almost think, like, "What did I get myself into?" Um, but back to your original point too, Ricardo, I'm one of those people that I will not back down. I
Mhm.
will not back down from a challenge. Never once have I backed down. I I almost, in my head, as I'm thinking, I don't think I can do this, it's like, well, you're gonna do it. And you can do it. And remember when you told your mom 2 weeks ago that you were gonna do this, and she said, "No way, you can't, you cry in commercials. There's no way you could do that." And I just was like, I'm gonna do it. I double down. I don't know if you're like that too, Ricardo, but
I am.
once somebody tells me, somebody close to me is like, "There's no way you can do that." Oh, it's a double down for me. I'm like, okay, I see you and I raise you. I'm gonna do it. So while it was a scary moment, it was also like a challenge accepted.
I love that, and you're right, I am exactly the same. Yeah, I had when I first started doing everything that I do, people, were telling me in the beginning, like, "No one's gonna listen to you. Your voice isn't that great. They're not gonna wanna listen to these stories and all this other stuff," and I thought, "You know what? This is all very important, and I believe in it, and it's also therapeutic for me to talk about this, and if it's therapeutic to me, it might be therapeutic to others as well to share their stories. I will show you." And I've been doing this for over 10 years now, so
And you know,
I'm
Ricardo,
right
I
there
think
with you.
even the times that I've listened, I said, "Oh, he has the best voice." So
Oh,
don't,
well, thank you.
don't listen to them. You tell them, "Mwah,
Right.
out with you."
I appreciate that, thank you. So you end up getting in there, and how long did the training last? And when you started the training, I guess, what were some of the things that were, I'll just use the same word, kind of overwhelming in a sense? Because for me, a lot of I mean, a lot of the times you start out with geography, and if you know the area already, I mean, a lot of it is good, but and I say this all the time, but it's true every single time, there'll be parts of the area that you work where people who have been there long enough, and I'm just making this name up, but they'll know Bob's Road. And
Mhm,
they'll say, "It's over on Bob's Road, you know?" And we're like, "No, I don't." And then you end up doing a geography ride where you go out there to see what
mhm,
they're talking about. So
yeah.
for you, when you were first starting out and all, before you started taking calls, what were some of the pieces that were just kind of overwhelming at times?
Absolutely, all of it for 500 Bob,
Yeah, all of
okay?
it. I like
All
that.
of it. D, all of the above. Um, Initially, it's academy is cool because 'cause you're like that's your first 3 weeks where you're really just reading a book, and you're like, "Okay, this sounds great," "This is all fine," and then you start to go on the job. So you start to do your certain phases. Our program was very amazingly structured, we had a lot written down. Our training coordinator at the time did a really great job, documenting that so that you felt very supported by structure, which I like because I like structure. So
Mhm.
that worked for me. But what isn't lovely is the grouchy trainer you have, that is jaded and um, almost unwilling to change. I feel like that's hard, especially when you're trying to learn something new. What else is hard is the constant berating of new people. Like, you think hazing in college is bad? Like, welcome to the 911 world. I don't know anything about. I mean, literally, like it's like Mean Girls on steroids. On Wednesdays, they wear black. Like they don't like new people. You might not even last a week. So I'm not going to invest any time in you. Be quiet, be in the corner, and don't talk. There was one morning when I tried to contribute during a briefing during like maybe my 8th week. And if looks could kill, that supervisor shot me a look and I would have been dead right there. So, there some of that stuff is overwhelming. Some of the socioeconomic facets of the world. I want people to know that that is so overwhelming for somebody who's an empath like me and feels very intensely. On the flip side, the learning curve is intense too. I
Mhm.
was very blessed to be in an area where I was familiar with most of the roads. I'd grown up there. So while it wasn't my hometown, it was like pretty north of. So I was familiar with some of the major streets. However, the county I dispatched for was very varied. It wasn't just a, city streets, 12 by 12 block, radius. It was, hey, man, this is the third largest county in Colorado. Welcome. You're going to have rural area where Bob's Road exists, but then you're also going to have, tiny little pockets where we're fighting over 4 lanes of traffic. One's this, and one's this. And if you're in this turning lane, then you're, so those kind of things I don't think people understand. And I will tell you the geography was really tough too. Even being familiar with the area, trying to figure out 100 blocks for the first time. I'm blonde, Ricardo, so like there are challenges that come with that, but everybody else was lost too. And I think it was week 5 that me and another trainee looked at each other and we go, "Oh, I get it. I get what a 100 block does," Um, so yeah, it's hard, but things, we don't necessarily think about. Oh, and then let's turn on, 18 different screens, 5 different mouses, and a foot pedal and a bunch of stuff that we have no idea what we're doing, and you got to learn all these commands to do something in this particular program. Oh, and you're going to be talking to people that are like dying all the time. So, minor things, really, Ricardo.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The explanation, or the description rather, that you just gave of the amount of monitors and mice and keyboard and all of that, someone picturing trying to move it around, it's almost like learning stick shift for the first
Yes.
time. And for those who've never driven a stick shift, well, if you ever do, then you'll get an idea. But it's trying to, and the reason I say learning how to drive a stick shift too is because the way you do it, everything has to be in sync. And you have to, even if the slightest timing is off, you end up stalling out.
Mhm.
And it can be similar to that when you're training, when you're trying to get everything to sync, when you're trying to get dialed in, as I call it. And there's so many different factors and variables that come into this position. But as we've been talking as well, it's very rewarding as well. There's a lot of bad that is in 911, yes, but there are rewarding moments, and it's those moments that bring you back to the reason why you basically started to begin with. And sometimes you might not know why you were starting to begin with there, and you'll take a call or something that ends up solidifying the fact that you are in the right spot. So with that being said, for you, you've gone through your training and such. Was there any moments early on that kind of happened where you realized, I'm in the right spot, this is where I'm supposed to be?
It's a great question. I think my training was 6 months. So that's
Hmm.
how my department did it. And it was 6 months straight. So you had a phase for phones, and it was trying to build blocks. So, like, thinking Legos here. So, your phase for phone learning, and then you moved on to the secondary radio, where you learned how to do clearances and talk with deputies and get their requests. And
Hmm.
then, if you pass through that, you moved on to primary, which was you were dispatching the calls, you're making the critical thinking decisions, things like that. So, in the 6 months of training, I really don't remember much other than holy shit, I'm getting through it. There wasn't there wasn't a whole lot of time to validate or do even a double check, a gut check of like, am I in the right spot? I don't know. I'm one of those people that I just grit and bear it and I get through
Hmm.
it. So in that 6 months, I would tell you that there wasn't any sort of validating, like, okay, cool, like you got this, you could do it. But a couple weeks after, I think I finished training in October.
Hmm.
Um, October, early November. December 12th was the Arapahoe High School shooting, and it was my team on, and I was on phones. Thank God, because I don't even think I could have kept up with any radio traffic that day. Um, but as you're sitting there taking that call and that other call and the next call, because your call queue is full, um, and people are screaming, and there's a lot of stuff going on with an active shooter scenario, you think to yourself, holy crap, this is happening. Holy crap, I don't necessarily have the training. Like, where was active shooter training? What page of the training manual was that? What day was we covered that? It wasn't. It wasn't covered. That didn't
Right.
happen. Did I make it through it? Hell yeah. Did I triage those calls like a boss? Hell yeah, I did. And I think at the end of the day, that was really validating. A couple months later, when we did our after action with the entire shift and the entire team, they were listening to calls, and there are validation things that you have to do with every single phone call. You have to validate the phone number. You have to validate the address. In certain circumstances, like an active shooter, sometimes those things don't happen because you're just going so quickly, you need the information. But we listened to like 6 of my calls, and it was like, so you're calling from, and you're at this address. Okay, and so you're calling from, I know, you're calling from, and you're at this address. And 4 supervisors looked at me, and they just said, holy shit, good job, Leah. Like, you did the job. Not only were you getting the information, but you were hitting all the validations that we needed. They were like, "Oh my gosh." And I felt in that moment like, "Yes, I can do this. I had training, but not specific active shooter training.
Right.
And my instincts kicked in and they were good instincts. So that was validating for me and like, okay, you can do this. So
That is amazing, and that's why I ask as well because, there will be some folks that I've spoken to where it's just almost immediately when they're in training, they've taken those first couple of calls or whichever, or, maybe they were assisting with something, and they know. There was a person that I was speaking to, a few months back who was doing their sit along and they knew at that moment. But there's also folks who have gone through and after a little bit after training is kind of like you when something happens. And a lot of us, there are some pretty big incidents that end up happening just after training. And obviously you ended up working this. And how many people are on the floor at a time along with you? And how many? What's the shift? What was it? Was it 8 or 12 hours?
that's a great let me set the stage for you,
Hmm.
Ricardo. So after training, I had been assigned, you just get slotted in where they need help. So I was slotted into a day relief shift. So I worked a 9 a.m. till 7 p.m. So we worked 4 10s in our shift work. So, and I was working with the day shift team that I had trained extensively on throughout my phone training. So I had a lot of familiarity with a lot of the faces in there. At that time, there were 4 people staffed on console. So that means 4 bodies in the room working. And I think it was about 12:30 in the afternoon. So lunch breaks had just started and we just swapped. So, one lunch break had just finished and swapped out for another lunch break. What is the first thing you do when you get on lunch break? You go to the bathroom. So we had a telecommunicator back in the bathroom in the very back of the PSAP or public safety answering point, and all the phones just lit up. Everything went to chaos. And so here we are answering calls and triaging calls and kind of getting a radio dispatch right at the same time. Things started happening right at the same time because we had a SRO on scene, thankfully. Um, but my supervisor, I can hear her distinctly over some of my initial calls, like, "There's an active shooting. You need to come back." Trying to get that other body back so we can start working as a team of 4, instead of a limping team of 3. So that sets the stage for the kind of deluge of things we had going on.
I can't even imagine. Like I've dealt with a lot of calls that involved people with weapons and shootings that were going on, but nothing to this caliber. So I can't imagine sitting there. I mean, in a way, I can imagine sitting there, and someone yelling that, and right away, everyone is at attention, and you start working like a well-oiled machine. And I mean, just the way you were answering and what you said that you were listening to all of these, and you were just going and going and going. Let me ask this, and I don't know if you remember or not, but when you were listening to those back, and you said this was like a month or so later, was it, or
Yeah,
a few
I
weeks
think
later, something like that?
I think I'm trying to think, probably 2.5 months later. So mhm. So
Do you even remember, like, any of those feelings that you had as you're just going and going and going?
absolutely.
Mhm.
So something I truly believe in is audible, like PTSD. I think that when we were listening back, I had a trigger warning. So my training supervisor had given me a trigger warning. Hey, we're going to be listening to a lot of your calls and some of the radio traffic. This could affect you. But even with that warning, kind of even as a shield was up in that room, I remember, and it brings you right back there. It's almost like you're right back in that seat. You can smell the smells. Hear the feelings. Like it's just like it brings you right back there. And the adrenaline builds, and you feel that feeling in your body, like, oh, fight, flight. What am I doing here? So I truly believe that there were those effects, even recalling that. So, and that was, I think, the first time I had experienced PTSD as a 911 dispatcher. So.
And you just gave me goosebumps. 'Cause, You know, I think a lot of us when we're taking these calls, especially something like this that you're talking about as well, this is experience. We don't realize how embedded, deeply embedded some of these calls get until we hear something that triggers us and it all floods back. And it's those moments where you realize, wow, like that really did do something to me that it's coming back because I feel you. Like I used to, and I still love this specific show that I'm going to mention right now. But Law and Order SVU,
Mm,
love the
favorite.
show. I'll
Love it.
watch it every so often. But there were a few that were back to back that had to do with some kind of hard domestics, and they were playing audio. And I remember sitting there and I got up and I walked out and I didn't realize that I had been standing in the kitchen for a while. And then I realized those sounded exactly like some of the harder ones that I remember taking, but
Mhm.
some of them were buried so deep that I hadn't remembered them until I listened to that traffic. So I don't watch the show as much
Yeah,
anymore,
yeah.
but for good reason. Like it's a
Mhm.
good show, but there are a few things that have popped up where I'm like, I just, some of those they came back and I didn't even know that they were there. So what I ended up doing was just typing them out and writing them because it was therapeutic. So that's how I end up doing that. Now, going back to this, to this whole incident and everything, you mentioned that later on, the after action and everything else, was there an immediate debriefing that
Yes,
that you all were a part of? Oh, good. That's
yes.
good because in some centers, even now, in a lot of places, dispatch is still not in the debriefings, which really sucks because
It's unacceptable. It's
right.
absolutely unacceptable, for that practice to continue, and that needs to change. Um, advocate for that. I'm an advocate for that because of this incident. I
Mhm.
think it's so important for them to get in and hear. There was an initial debrief afterwards, which was a large debrief for everybody in our agency that had been involved. Crime scene, first responders, evidence techs, like whoever, come on in. So that was very helpful. Um, and it helps a dispatcher understand and put the pieces together because that's kind of how they framed the debrief is they walked us through the incident step by step. And I think that that's so powerful for a dispatcher for us only to have that audible understanding of the start of the incident, but then also be making the phone calls that, the coroner, the crime scene, like we get to see the entire incident unfold, but we don't see it. It's only through, our headsets and our phones. So for me to sit and listen to other parts and other experiences helps fill in the gaps for me. So that was really powerful. And then my center went above and beyond and got us a dispatch only debrief where it was every single person that was only in that room. So just the core four and a psychiatrist. And that was really helpful as well and a little bit more intimate and personal. Um, and I was among the other folks in the room and they had 20, 30 plus experience in dispatch. And I've never seen any one of them be overly emotional. And we went through a whole box of tissues, just the four of us. So
Wow.
it was powerful and way more helpful on a more kind of intimate level for us. So
I love that. I love that happened because like I said already, a lot of places they dispatch isn't involved in that, and that really sucks. But the fact that all of you that you had that support as well, but also what came out of this too, listening to yourself and having those folks tell you how good you did. I mean, there's so much here to unpack. The fact that you all had your own dispatch debriefing, which is awesome. You were validated in the fact that, you know what, I can do this shit. Like this
yeah,
was I did this. And there's just I can't say enough that
I
how
know.
how good this is. But the fact that you also had that gift of closure. Because as 911 professionals, we don't always get that. And you move on to the next one and then you wonder. But there are those moments again, where you get that gift of closure and it helps, especially the fact that the way you put it, they walked you through each step. They filled in those gaps where beyond that, or before that rather, all you had is what you were creating in your brain. And sometimes, and what people, those in the general public who listen to this show as well, or even others that are out in the field, they don't understand is that sometimes what we piece in our head is way worse than what is actually going on. Now, with the situation, it is probably pretty much the same, but in other situations, that's what we're doing. We're putting these, puzzle pieces together. Sometimes it's right on, sometimes it's way worse, but when we get that gift of closure, damn, that helps that much more.
It so does. And I think that there's something to be said about how that affects you in later too. I think you can look back, and if you're a current dispatcher now, or you have previously dispatched, like if you look back and think through all the calls that you didn't get closure on, like I feel like that starts, it's almost like a body count, hiding in your closet. Because it's like, who knows, the next time you're going to be like, oh, that file just came out in my brain. Like, why am I thinking about that? There
Right.
is and same on the same side with like PTSD, again, a body count of like, ooh, when's that going to creep out and, boo scare me, when I'm coming around a corner, or, if I'm taking the dog for a walk and I hear a firework, like what kind of things is going to trigger. So I think it's interesting as a dispatcher to think about those two things: lack of closure, and also, exposure to incidents that could cause PTSD, because that's stuff that is just now starting to be researched for folks that have that auditory effect versus just a visual effect like normal first responders. So, yeah, so things to think about, things to be aware of, that hasn't been talked about before. So,
Yeah, for sure. And there's what I love though is that there's so many more resources out there now, where before it wasn't really out there. People were not really talking about it. So I'm so happy that a lot of that has changed. Now you go through this, you're a little bit out of training and everything. You've got this validation and stuff, and you continue on your public safety journey. So how long do you think you felt like before you were dialed in? And the reason I ask is because for myself, I would say it was about 2.5 years. Of course, I knew the policies and procedures, you know what you're doing, you've got that confidence and stuff, but there's a moment, there's a point where you feel like you're truly dialed in to a lot of it. I kind of feel like the sweet spot for a lot of us is about 2.5, sometimes 2.5 to 3, but it's that 2 to 2.5 years where you hit that dialed in spot.
absolutely. And I'd say mine was like 18 months to 2 years, right there.
Mhm.
Because I think at that point, it was when I started accepting the job of CTO. I had gone to my training person and said, hey, when can I get a trainee? I like training. And she kind of looked at me and was like, who are you? We're mandating trainers around here. You want to volunteer? And I should have sang her like the Katniss song. Yeah, I volunteer. So do. Um, but I think that is what started solidifying some of those knowledge points.
Mhm.
Because when you have to know your stuff good enough to teach somebody else how to do it, that's when it really starts to cement the learning within your own sphere. So I'd say right around 18 months to 2 years is when it's like, okay, cool, like I kind of got this. We came a far cry from, I remember that first day on phone training, like probably 4 weeks in, where my trainer was like, okay, it's a Saturday morning, day shift. It's time to take 911 calls. And I looked at her like, I don't want to. I don't want to. And she's like, you're going to do it. The next one that comes in, you're going to do it. And I was like, so you hear that 911 call come in, and everybody on the floor heard her, and they're just like looking at me like, you going to answer that? You going to get it? And I think it was like trill, 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 trill. And my trainer's like, do it. And so it's like, I hit the answer button, and it was a medical call, so it was okay. I got the address, I got a little bit about what was happening, and then I got to transfer to fire rescue, so it wasn't that scary. But we came a far cry from that. That Leah answering that first 911 call, freaking out, to now watching my trainees and getting to tell them, answer the call. You can do it. It's okay. So I think that's kind of when my knowledge solidified, 18 months to 2 years. So
Oh man. So then I have to ask as well then, because they're mandating people, but you're volunteering. What what was it, do you think, that was in you that made you want to train? And the reason I ask too is because a lot of folks, it's 3, maybe 4 years into their career when they start thinking about becoming a certified training officer or CTO. And it's always one of two reasons. One, they had shit training and they wanted to become a CTO to mold that next generation that's coming in so that they didn't have to deal with what they had to deal with. Or they had amazing training and they basically wanted to continue that cycle of, a kind of a legacy of trainers that are, really doing good and putting a lot of themselves into these people who are coming in. But you, right off the bat, you're like, hell, let's do this. Like, I want to bring some people in. Let's do this. So what was it? I mean, was it maybe basically just kind of your love for the profession already?
yeah, I would say so. A, B, so good training, bad training, and wanting to either break the mold or continue the mold. Because
Mhm.
within my 6 months, I had cycled through a bunch of trainers. You do different phases with different trainers with different specialties. So some of them were good, some of them are not so good. So I think A and B definitely applied to me, Ricardo, but also I'm one of those people that love to teach people how to do something. My mom was an English teacher. My sister's a teacher, like teaching's in my blood. Um, when I was doing my master's, I was a TA. So I taught 3 sections of public speaking. And I loved that. I loved creating content. I loved being in front of the classroom and interacting with students. I loved seeing those students with their note cards like this. The first speech, and then by the third speech, they're just like whizzing through it. So
Yeah.
I love that aspect of it. And I knew bringing that passion to folks on this side and folks on the 911 side could only be a good thing. If they have a good training experience, they're going to be amazing at their job. And they're going to have really good foundation to go out there and crush it for the citizens, and crush it for the first responders that we support. And that, I was like, yeah, sign me up for that.
That is awesome. I love your approach to all of it. I would have loved to have had you as a trainer. I would have loved to have worked with you. It would have been a lot of fun, man. We would have had some good times.
We My trainees and we had a lot of fun. So I tell you, Susie Switchboard, Tommy Transfer, whatever we could do to make that content come to life, and and realize that this is a job. We're going to do it really good, but we're also going to have fun doing it. I was
Awesome.
in for it. So
So you end up going through all this time. You end up leaving dispatch. You become an industry partner and you end up writing a book as well.
yeah. Yes.
So let's jump into that as we're kind of going towards the end of this episode already, which is crazy that we've been talking for this long, and it doesn't even seem like it's been this long. But I want to make sure to touch on this because I also want to be mindful of your time, and I know you've got a meeting that's going to be coming up, and I want to give enough time for your book as well. So the book is called Lives on the Line. These are stories from America's first responders, and this is from you as well as Emma McDowell. So tell me about this book.
Okay. So in 2016, I'd heard it enough. We see enough crazy shit in this world. Why aren't we writing our stories down? And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. So, summer 2016, I started writing some of my first stories down. The first one I wrote down was my experience with the Arapahoe High School shooting, just because that lived so prominently in my brain. And it's something I'll never forget. So, that story was just a natural first for me. And what I found, Ricardo, was that it was not only fun to write the story down, to create something, because I'm a very creative person, but it was also therapeutic. It helped move some of the emotions that were in the front of my cortex to the processing center of my brain, where it could rest and it could simmer, and get filed and dusty. And that was very needed for me. So 2016, I started, got pregnant, did a couple babies. Okay, did some stints on graveyards. And things happen, life happens, 2020 happens. There is strife in the industry, there's personal strife happening in my life. I'm an open book, literally. So depression, postpartum depression, really hard times with some toxicity in the workplace, and I just had decided it's time for me to move on from 911. And I don't know about you, Ricardo, but when I made that decision and I left, grief, just intense grief, like I have never experienced before. I watched my mom die, and I wasn't even grieving my mom's death as I was like my death of 911 and leaving the profession. And there's so much to unpack there that was really hard for me. But then I revisited some of my stories and I said, okay, cool. This is still a part of me. I still bleed 911. I work now as a rapid SOS partner. So I'm affecting change that way. But revisiting the book, I was like, how can I build on sharing my stories, helping process myself, but also the mission of bringing awareness to what 911 professionals do every day, and really targeting changing the mindset of Americans that 911 professionals are first responders, because that's not the case right now. So that really propelled me, as well as the time that I had now, not working graveyards and getting only 4 hours of sleep and being sleep deprived the entire time. I was kind of like, okay, cool, let's do this. Let's write this damn thing. So pretty soon I had it written down and professionally edited, and here we are. So I have a collection of 50-ish stories, all settled out. And what started as, hey, we're just going to share stories, is really now a journey through 911, a journey through, death, destruction, depression. It's a journey through grief with, losing a parent, and it's a coming of age story of Leah Harms, and Emma McDowell too. She's my sister, a current 911 supervisor in Colorado, and she contributed some stories that are just outstanding. While I was primarily a law dispatcher only, she is law, fire, and medical. So she has a fabulous repertoire of things to share and really contribute in a similar passion to me, to highlight America's first responders. So that's what the book is all about. That's a little bit about Emma and I and what we are about. And yes, we're sisters. Yes, I wrote a book with my sister, and it's so cool. So that's just probably my favorite part that I got to do with my sister. So
That's exciting. And so I have to ask because, excuse me, when I ended up publishing my first book, Imagine Listening, and there were all the stories from the I Am 911 movement. When I had put some of my personal ones in there,
mhm.
it was there was so much weight that was lifted off of my shoulders with some of those stories, but also the stories of others that had gone out there, and just kind of thinking about how they felt as well once they sent those in. So for you and your sister, when you got all of these down, when you were done with it, what was that feeling like? Was it similar? Was it like, I did it? Like, there they are. How did it feel?
It feels amazing. Like you said, it's like a lighter feeling, but also like kind of an ethereal feeling too. Like, and also terrifying because it's strangely personal.
Right.
It's strangely personal to write these stories down, not only because they relate to what I was hearing and listening and some of these very intimate moments that I shared with people, but also how they tie to intimate personal moments outside. Like, as we do this job, Ricardo, it becomes more than just a job. And I think that resounds with every single professional, 911 professional out there. It's more than just a job. So as I'm writing these stories, it's more than just a story. It's more than just a call. It's my personality, it's my perception, it's my reality, it's it's my blood, flesh, and tears in form. So there's fear in sharing that with people, but there's also exhilaration in knowing it's out there, and
Right.
hopefully it creates change. That's my hope. So,
So with that as well, once you had everything out, written down, and you've gone through this entire process, how do you feel like the profession had changed you?
oh, so much. Even the other day, I was looking at like a Facebook memory, and I was like, "Who is that chick?" Who's that girl? Uh, I wear a lot of black now. No, I'm just kidding. But honestly, that's a great question, and I'm deflecting with humor, but the truth is, it changes you so much. Just like you had mentioned, hey, that Law and Order episode was a trigger for you. Like I was a sucker for like anything Dateline, like anything, and now I cannot consume that anymore. I cannot consume it anymore. Probably because I have two young children too. That just scares the shit out of me. Um, but a lot of other things. I don't really like to talk on the phone anymore. I spent like 8 years on the phone basically, so that's just not my jam. But there are other things too, like things that the way you think, the way you feel, the way you process things. I think there's so much different. I look back at the naive and I talk about this too in the book. Like, I look back at the naive dink, dual income, no kids, little girl that started that job, and I look back at me now, and it's like, whoa, whoa.
It's definitely an eye opener.
Hmm.
I have kids as well, and they'll be playing around doing certain things, and I'll tell them almost immediately, like, have fun, but please be careful.
Yep.
And they go, we are. I'm like, okay.
Are
Yeah,
you?
I'm sure you are, but anything can happen. And they go,
Right.
we know your time in dispatch. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's valid. I'm not just saying shit to
Yeah.
say shit. Like, I don't want you to get hurt. I know so many different scenarios, of things that have happened. And in some cases, they're like, oh, we're happy that you went through that because you helped us with this or whichever. But other times, I'm sure they're like, just let
Dad,
us. Right? Yeah.
Dad, let me climb this tree. Dad,
Right.
it's like,
Yes.
okay, but I've seen 18 different ways of you dying here. So, let's
Right.
just not. Thanks.
Yes. So, as we go into the wrap up of this episode, which has been awesome to have you on here. This has been excellent. I could have talked to you for hours. But as you were just talking a little bit ago about how you saw that memory, and you thought, who is that person? So here's my final question for you. If you could go back in time with the knowledge that you have now to talk to yourself in the beginning of your dispatch career, what advice would you give yourself?
It's a great question, Ricardo, and I'm gonna be this person. But I'm just gonna go back and tell Leah, enjoy it, take care of yourself, and it's gonna be okay. So I would more just be like a cheerleader because I'm not one of those people that looks back and goes, "Yeah, I wish I could change that." Because every single thing that happened in my life prepared me for this, prepared me for who I am today, and made me who I am today. And there's so much to be proud of and joyful in that existence. We truly become who we are because of what we've lived, and it's a beautiful thing to look and go, you know what? It's all right. It's okay. I made it, and I'm proud of who I am today. So we're gonna keep growing. We're gonna keep transforming. But I would just go back and tell her, rah rah, you go, girl, you do it. Just make sure to do some mental health checks every once in a while. But proud of who I am. Happy to be where we are today, and just grateful for the ride.
Perfect. That's perfect. I've had um I've had people ask me the same thing, just like off, at a conference or whatever, and I always tell them I wouldn't change anything because all of it made me who I am today. If I were to go back in time to change something, I might not be in this position. It might not be the same. So no, I would do the same thing. I'd go back and
Ditto,
just say everything's going to be all right. You're going to make it
ditto.
through this.
Me too.
Thank
Absolutely.
you so much for being on. This has been an awesome episode, and I just loved learning about you. And how can people find out more about you and the book? Where can they get the book? All this good stuff.
Great thing, Ricardo. I really Google, Amazon, Apple Books. It's out there in ebook version. So just Google, Lives on the Line, Stories from America's First Responders. You can Google my name, Leah Harms. I also have a website too that people can go to, Leah, Lea. H is in Henry, ARMS.com, and you can find more information about me and where to get the book. And I would love to have you as a reader.
Perfect. Awesome. I'm looking forward to checking it out as well. And again, thank you for being on. I will be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, if you are a new dispatcher, seasoned dispatcher, or retired, I would love to share your story. I've been doing this for over a decade, and it is truly my passion. And it's also therapeutic to get these stories out. And just thank you, all of you, for everything. So you can check me out here, and that the email is going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. And the easiest way to do all of this is to simply go to links.co/WTT podcast. And that's links with two I's.co/WTT podcast. You'll find everything there. Where to schedule an episode, my email, social media, all of it. Check it out there. This live broadcast has been sponsored by In Digital, a leader next gen core services. I said live, this is pre-recorded, but when you see this, it's going to be like it's live. So so there you go. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, as well as X, and you can listen 24/7 to the podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we will see you in the next one.